Hello and welcome to this video, which deals with the different classes of use in relation to private car insurance. My name is Brendan O'Mahony. So first of all, the background to the different classes of use, it really comes from the insurer's need to differentiate between private car risks. So when private car risks are proposed to insurers, they need to rate these risks and use a number of rating factors. These rating factors include the type of cover. Obviously, third-party only cover is going to be cheaper than third-party fire and theft and comp. They also use rating discrimination between the different types of vehicle. On the age of driver is another way that insurers differentiate between the various rates. And the fourth one that I'll put in here is the use to which the vehicle will be put. And that's really where the class of use will apply. So insurers generally use 4 different classes of use. Class 1A, which is also known as SDMP cover, Class 1B, Class 2, and the highest class is known as Class 3. So in this video, what we will do is look at each of the covers and explain what is covered under each. The first area that we look at is Class 1A. And Class 1A is social, domestic and pleasure use only. So it's the lowest risk of a claim. It is the lowest premium and provides a fairly narrow, but it's a cover that basically will suit a lot of us. So it includes, for example, the likes of a factory worker who drives to work, parks the car, drives home in the evening, maybe goes out to a match, goes out for a spin, but doesn't use the vehicle for any work-related use. Another example would be an office employee or somebody working in the home. So the cover excludes, for example, using the car for any work-related purpose, and it also excludes commercial travelling. And we have a general exclusion in every class of use that we're going to cover today, where motor trade purposes are not insured, again because there's a Motor Traders Road Risks policy to cover that. Racing, rallying are not insured, and the carriage of passengers for hire and reward is also excluded because, again, there's taxi or PSV insurance that will cover this use, which can of course include hackney cover. So the next level of cover is Class 1B. And Class 1B is very similar to Class 1A in that it provides social, domestic and pleasure, but it also extends to cover the use for business by the policyholder only. So an example of this would be a solicitor who might visit a client or go to court, a nurse who might visit a patient in their home, although some insurers will insist on Class 2 cover for a nurse visiting patients in the home. Again, we'll cover that later in this short video. The cover excludes carriage of goods for your business, but that doesn't mean that you cannot bring a briefcase or a laptop because they're not considered goods. Again, commercial travelling is also excluded. As I mentioned in the earlier slides, the use for motor trade, racing, rallying or carrying of passengers for hire or reward will also be excluded. Moving on, the next highest class is Class 2 use. So Class 2 use covers social, domestic and pleasure, and it also permits the carriage of goods or samples belonging to the policyholder or their employer, and for other drivers to use the vehicle for the business of the policyholder, not for the named driver's business, but the business of the policyholder. So again, a typical example would be that of a shopkeeper who might do home deliveries, and not just the shopkeeper in person, but employees will also use the car on the shop business. It excludes commercial travelling, and every class that we're going to discuss today is going to exclude the use by the motor trade for racing, rallying, and it'll also exclude the carriage of passengers for hire or reward. So the final level of cover that we're going to deal with is Class 3 use. So Class 3 is the highest exposure. It provides the cover that we've set out in Class 2, but it also permits commercial travelling. So for example, this includes a commercial traveller who might drive from town to town seeking business. These drivers who need Class 3 will often do a high amount of driving. There will be higher mileage as a consequence, and it does include the carriage of samples and goods. Again, every class of use will exclude use for the motor trade, racing, rallying, and carriage of passengers for hire or reward. So often in lectures we're asked, why is a Class 1B cover rated by some insurers as Class 2? So taking the example of the private health nurse. When insurers consider these, they look at a number of criteria. So for example, they look to see if a mileage allowance is paid to the employee by the employer. Is indemnity to the employer required? Obviously, how often the business use is going to be used. So maybe an idea of the mileage involved. And finally, I might look at the extent, as I say, of the business mileage in relation to this use. So that will help an insurer decide whether they're going to rate it as Class 1B or Class 2. The Class 2 rates will, needless to say, generate an increased business premium. And again, the insurance company is going to get a higher premium for the risk. Sometimes this additional premium can be recouped from the employer. So it provides the insurer with more premium, obviously given that higher rates are charged for Class 2 risks than Class 1 risks. And just to close then, the premium levels. Class 1A, as we mentioned earlier, this is the lowest exposure and would have the cheapest premium. Class 1B, again, relatively low exposure, and it may not be any more expensive than Class 1B. Class 2, again, that could be Class 1 rates plus somewhere between 20 and 25%. And finally, Class 3, which could be Class 1 rates plus up to 50% extra. So I hope that this video has been useful to you, and I wish you all the best with your studies. Thank you very much.